Happy Friday. Today's the 17th here in the United States of America. Man, I'm a little fried today. Apologies, everyone. We are coming to bring a conclusion to the Hidden Battlefield series we're doing with Mist. Again, please, if you've been watching these episodes, please make sure to give me a sub to the channel, comment, like. Also, follow me on Might Not Be For You Pod on X and Into the Mist 13. And we would really appreciate that. What we're going to do today is we're going to wrap up some of the heavier topics and then go into some solutions. And obviously, like we said last week, we're going to be focusing more on the positive side of this and the hopeful side of this that don't feel like you're in peril. We still have the power. And Mist is going to go over some things to help empower the parents. Last we talked about was visibility and a lot of the misconceptions when it comes to the internet and like when your kid gets on Roblox or other sorts of media. And today we're going to actually kick it off here, Mist. I think we could talk about maybe the long-term impacts. I think that was the next topic we were going to move into last week. If you want to take the floor and take it from there.
Yeah, totally. As you know, as we know, trying to get to more of the solutions oriented mindset this week, and I feel you about it being kind of a crazy week. So, looking at all of those things that culminated, right, which is everything that we're avoiding. If you're catching us at this episode, go back and watch the last one. It's crucial. But so the long term impact of these kind of things, even catching it early, even protecting your child early and getting there soon, the effects can be kind of seated inside of them because they're at such a foundational age in their life that it kind of they will grow past it, obviously with proper loving and care, but that it does kind of stick around for a while. The effects are not temporary. Harm at a long age can lead to long-term psychological consequences. And that not only hurts the individual but families, social interactions, future relationships and communities, and all sorts of manner of connection. Sorry, I have to sit outside sadly for this Wi-Fi connection today. It's been kind of a crazy day.
You're coming through good so far. You're good.
Great. That's awesome. Cool. I'm so glad about that. But so, the thing about these is like we want to talk to our kids, right? The most important thing, these long-term impacts, the fact that these kids go on to live, what if the victims go on to live in society, if they're still damaged, they become part of society as these damaged units, which if there's a lot of unhealed pain out there for a lot of these children, that can really stack up and add up and be a problem for these kids, and for society, right? Like it puts a burden on society. It's not that every one of these kids is going to run off and become criminals, but that they're going to be hurting, carrying these burdens as they go through society and not living up to the self-actualization that we want our kids and nation to be. So that's kind of like you know just to consider the long-term impact and the fact that each kid grows up to be part of the network of society, and that each individual is a connection to a larger pattern. And so if these things become more and more large scale, they're really just going to damage not only the children but our families and society as a whole. So to switch gears and to kind of start focusing on the solutions mindset, I would like to say that that's the most important thing. We've talked a lot about a lot of dark stuff. We've talked about a lot of heavy things, but that really what we need to focus on through all of this stuff that it may make you feel burdened and despair. And I don't want you to feel those things, but I want you to experience them for a minute. And then I want to be, then we go on to empowerment. I always try to say it's not black pilling, it's black flag pilling. Like it's time to
I
get
love
up
that.
and do something about it. And so for parents, awareness is more effective than fear. people don't need to panic, but they do need to understand how these patterns worked. So communication then becomes the most critical thing between parents, guardians, and the children. When children feel safe talking about uncomfortable situations, they are far more protected. Platforms also have a role to play in building safer systems, not just reactive moderation, but that comes from parental awareness. All of these discussions can come after the conversation between a parent and a child. And then finally, digital awareness should be treated as a life skill. Just as children are taught how to navigate the physical world safely, they need to be equipped to navigate the digital world as well. At the end of the day, this is not about fear. It is about understanding how the environment has changed so we can adapt and protect the people who need it most. And, I interviewed several parents in this last week that some of them work in the field of social work. Some of them have, worked in the field of psychology and kids. And they said basically they all came to a consensus, and this is pretty much what they said. The only things that they can think of for the next step for empowering parents are stuff as simple as just being as active in your kid's life as you can. This is their quote. Even if you work your ass off and they're home alone, so you kind of parent out of guilt and let them play the games and stuff so they're not bored and want to leave the house when you're not there, be as close to them as possible. Make sure they trust you not to freak out. These are the things that helped me parenting, and I've gotten feedback from all my kids on this. They trust me to not just ground them from everything or calling the cops in a huff when you hear something crazy from them. Like I said, that was a quote, and several parents kind of agreed that that was the best solution going forward is like just be proactive in your kids' lives. Be there, check the devices, talk to them, have the communications that are tough. Leave the door open for them to feel safe because predators will prey on kids not feeling safe talking to you. But if your kids trust you with everything and already know, that there's weirdos out there, that these things are going to happen, that they may run into these experiences, and they know that the first thing to do is to run to mom and dad, that overcomes so many problems because then you can work together. And then in terms of the grooming, right? Because we talked about some of the grooming last week,
Right.
which definitely gets like heavy, and I don't necessarily want to go back into that, all of the heavy stuff, go back and watch last week, but I will kind of go over just I'll hit some bullet points about the grooming, what is grooming, and then I'm going to go right into some solutions about it just so people kind of remember what it was that we were discussing. So the grooming phases are targeting and surveillance. That's where they identify a child with unmet needs. Then there's trust building and rapport. People like people who are like themselves. Then they isolate, and then they desensitize, and then they comes into control and the maintenance. And that kind of goes through many different styles of communication, but in essence, that's what it is. And these things are so effective because of the neurological basis of suggestibility, because of children being underdeveloped and having underdeveloped prefrontal cortices. There's social learning. Kids are conditioned to follow authority and seek approval. There's language as hypnosis, repetition, rhythm, metaphor, and imagery activate the imagination. And then there's exploitation of vulnerabilities, loneliness, family conflict, low self-esteem, or online anonymity, right? Groomers would tailor language to these openings. So, some red flags for parents. There's behavioral red flags: sudden secrecy, withdrawal from family, sudden style changes, mood swings. There's linguistic red flags. The child repeats borrowed adult like phrases. It just starts using language that doesn't seem like theirs, talking differently, saying things like no one would understand if questioned on it. There's a relational aspect, like unusual attachment to a non-family adult, some sort of, and maybe that adult is using some sort of excessive flattery, or the kid looks excessively giddy. And then there's the digital red flags, which are like private messaging, late night online activity, and secrecy around devices. So the countermeasures really for parents begin with education. Learn how grooming language works. Recognize trans talk, and then talk to your kids about what is and isn't comfortable conversations to be having with people. If somebody's seeking to give your kids secrets, your kid should recognize that as a red flag. Then we have open communication. Make sure you create a home where no topic is off limit. Teach your kids to come to you. If they run to your arms, they're not going to run to anyone else. There's a lot of parents that role play these kind of situations. They talk about, they run through scenarios. That way the kid understands what's going on before they even see it. Monitor your kid online. Check their friends lists. Check their DMs. Look at be in the room with them when they're on the computer. Sit with them. Play the games with them. We covered some of these things last week.
Yep,
Um,
exactly.
and then code words. Establish a family code word. Do this away from devices. Don't do it in your house. Don't do it near your phone. Don't do it near any sort of technology. Go out in a field, basically, and choose a safe word with your kid. That way, your kid is your kid, and your kid knows that you are you. And that can help you not only in terms of somebody trying to take advantage of you, but also in terms of scamming. If somebody calls you with an AI voice of your kid saying that they need money or something, like, it's going to be a lot harder for you to trust that, or not just do it unless you have a code word, right?
That's a
Oh,
really good call out, actually. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt
yeah,
you, but that's a really
no,
good call out.
yeah, of course. You can easily see how that will just quickly come into play for positivity. Or I mean, come into action as a good thing, as a good interaction, because um, these voice
You
modulators nowadays are crazy. They're so
oh, dude, I
crazy
know.
good. And they don't really need that long of time to mimic you. It's like 15 or 30 seconds. So they're like super good. So yeah. And then the conversations to have with your children, right? As a rule of safety, safe adults don't ask kids to keep secrets. Have critical awareness. Teach your kids to be critically aware of the situations where somebody's trying to teach you really cool things, or insert themselves as a mentor digitally, or become your best friend without even knowing you, or teach how compliments and gifts can be used manipulatively. If just by your kid understanding, like, hey, this guy's coming and trying to lure me on a quest and teach me all these things, like, that's kind of weird. That's not normal, right? Like, I think it's a great thing, and especially compliments. Compliments to a child can be very powerful. Empowerment, empower your kid with the confidence to say no, and to report. Right, like if something online makes them feel uncomfortable, or something in real life makes them feel uncomfortable, teach your kid to say no. Teach your kid that it's okay, and then to run to you, right, to come to you and report, hey, I felt like I had to say no, and this is why. And then if like, then you can delegate, like, what's going on. And then there's affirmations and mantras are really powerful for teenagers. Teach protective self-talk to counter manipulative anchors. That way, these people can't get into your kid's mind, because they are based, their minds are more based in positive thinking. And for someone to try to throw these negative hooks in there, they would recognize that as something to report and say no. So groomers recognize language as a tool of control. So by borrowing from neuro-linguistic programming, seduction methods, persuasion psychology, salesman talk, self-empowerment, they can draw on um, examples from all that. They exploit natural neurological and developmental vulnerabilities in children, and awareness is the strongest inoculation. So once parents and children recognize the linguistic structures of manipulation, the predator's psychological advantage really then collapses. Um, and actually, that kind of I that went a little faster than I thought. I kind
Yeah,
of
man.
through my notes.
You blew
Um,
through it, man. I'll comment on it a little bit.
yeah, I didn't
Uh,
quite mean to. I was kind of thinking it was longer. And
no,
that
no, it's all good. We knew this one was gonna be a little, tighter because we didn't have much left to go through last week, but I think we both kind of like agreed. We were both feeling how heavy it was, and we could only imagine
Yeah.
what the viewer was feeling. So we kind of decided to break it up into two chunks. But to comment on that, like I remember, I like for me growing up, my parents never were my friends, right? But they were always open to me. Like they're like, if you're going out with your friends, you just come back and let us know what you get into, and we promise, like as long as you're not doing anything heinous, it's not like we might talk to you about it, but we're not gonna like condemn you or talk, berate you for smoking pot with your friends,
Banish
right?
you.
And so like it would be I'd go out with, I would be 15, 16. You know how it was. I don't know how, for me, I'm turning 39 next week, actually. And so, like, when I was in high school, people got into a lot of shenanigans, from like freshman, sophomore year. I'm sure it's about the same now, or maybe even younger, God forbid. But like, if I go out and maybe I did little mushrooms or something, I get dropped off at home. I would never drive because, I'd had that rapport with my family. I knew where to go because I had trust with my parents because I had an open dialogue. I had the ability to talk to them and feel comfortable letting them know what I would get into. And like, of course, I'd come back and I'd be, a little messed up. And then they let me go do my thing in the morning. I'd come downstairs and I have a cup of coffee ready for me. And mom's making breakfast and my dad's sitting there and he's like, "So what did you do?" And, we get into the conversation. And he would never um, talk down to me and make me feel like a piece of, like a terrible person. He would just kind of coach me. And the lessons that you're saying, I know my example is not the same of what we're trying to convey here for, trying to set up a rapport and like a trust system with your kids to ensure that they understand that they can come to you on these very weird and scary kind of interactions they could have online. But I think it applies because it's that rapport that you establish with your kids um, that ultimately
It
allows.
seemed to work with
I mean,
you. You know, you seem
yeah,
to have trusted your parents to, hearing it in your voice. That's a very, you seem comforted, knowing that, like, yeah, maybe I
yeah.
did something, but also you had that, just the way you described it. Sorry to interrupt.
No, you're good. I mean, like for me, it was also kind of like it became something kind. Maybe if they did this intentionally, if it was inadvertent on their behalf, but I would think about certain things that I may or may not get into with like my friends at the time, when you're 15, 16, 17 and stupid, you could get into anything. And, I would like, "Ah, you know what, man? Maybe I should go home." And I would, like, ask a buddy that is nearby, "Hey, can you pick me up from this place?" And we just go back to his house and just play video games, and immediately I'd tell my parents, like, "I left that party. It was getting a little too crazy. I just went over to so and so's house." And they're like, "Proud of you, son. You did the right thing. I'm glad you had fun, but you did the right thing." That rapport, I don't know how else it's kinda hard to explain, but I hope what I'm trying to convey here gets through is that based on what you're talking about for solutions, it like I've lived that. I've lived that a bit that, and maybe I'm fortunate in that I had that privilege and that that ability to have that kind of relationship with my parents. So like I would say it works. It's different. What my examples are different from what we're conveying here, but I think ultimately the formula is the same. And I totally agree. I mean, and it's worse for the kids now. I mean, when I grew up, we had Nokias with the Nokia block with the blue screen with Snake 2.0 on it. That was like the greatest technology we had,
Oh
and
man,
it was the best. I miss
it
that.
hurt the floor when it dropped.
It did. You could if you chucked it at someone, you do damage, man. You could cave someone's head in. It was serious, serious device.
I called mine
Um,
the Ghetto Brick 2007.
yeah. Dude, I remember the T-Mobile Sidekick. I don't know if you remember that. Anyway, I'm going
Oh
off
yeah.
topic. Dude, that thing was fun. That thing was cool. I had the first one and I was like, this thing is cool. And it was just the most impractical phone, and I got rid of it as soon as I could. Um, but yeah, like what kids are exposed to today, is on a whole other level from when we were kids, or from maybe anyone that's over the age of 30, maybe even like late 20s. We did not grow up in the world that the children are growing up in today, and it's only going to expound and it be exponential and how much more this technology is going to be rooting itself into daily life. So the best thing to do is to, like you said, miss, is like fall back to the old ways, if that makes sense. It's like just good old
Yeah,
wholesome familial bonding and being there and being not a friend. Because I'm not really a proponent of that. You know, I'm not a parent yet, but I wouldn't want my kids to look at me as my best friend. I mean, I would hope they have those kinds of feelings, but you know, the discipline needs to be there and what have you. But just being able to establish enough of a rapport where they can confide in you in anything. And then these tools you're talking about, I think are absolutely great in applying to achieve that on top of like building that rapport.
totally. And, it's really learning to measure yourself, right? The more that you are familiar with a situation, the easier it is for you to not panic when it happens to you. Then the less that you panic when a situation happens means the more in control you are of your emotions. And therefore, you can be more, receptive and proactive when dealing with your kids, who obviously, as you get to certain years, their emotions are going to be haywire. So really understanding, your feelings, having a solid data set where you feel comfortable being like, okay, I can talk about these things in a way that my kid can understand, and I can, then they can turn around and trust me to talk about these things with me. And it really all just comes from understanding the problem and then communicating the problem. And
100%.
that really just like heads it all off. And your story is a perfect example of how, treating it like that creates, a dynamic between kid and parent that is safe. My parents always said, if you're going to drink and drive, or if you're going to get in a vehicle with somebody who's drinking and driving, like, just call us. Sure, we may grumble and we'll talk to you about it tomorrow, but we will come and get you to make sure that you're not doing something fucked up, pardon, messed up.
No, you
Um,
can curse. You're good. That's
Cool.
fine.
And you can't see, you're not doing something that is going to cause you some serious repercussions, like, and we want you to feel safe about it. My dad was always like, look, if you tell me not to get mad about it first, then we can talk about it. And he's like, you may have done fucked up. And he's like, I'm going to fucking let you know, but I want you to bring those problems to me, like,
Right.
they you can't fix trauma that you don't know is there.
Exactly.
And it was always kind of like raise the flag, like, oh, hey, help needed over here, shoot up the flare. And that was just the way that I was taught to go through life. And it really has helped. And then of course transferring that to children, they're just going to repeat the pattern, and that makes us more safe as a society, and the kids more safe down the road, because then they can navigate these dire straits as we go forward.
Absolutely. I mean, like the key point is be there for each other. You know, child to parent, parent to child, be there for each other. That's the whole game here, right? I mean, at the end of the day, the only people that are going to love you on an near unconditional, I'll say, level will be your immediate family. Maybe your aunts, your uncles, your grandparents, your cousins. I mean, it extends out. Don't get or best friend. It extends out, but those that are closest to you, that you share the closest bonds, are there for you, and that it should be reciprocal. And what we're talking about here is digital. 90% of what we're talking about is digital. It's all controllable and coachable, right? And I think that's another positive to think here is just be more active, like pay attention to what your kid is playing, and then maybe play it with them a couple times. Maybe let them play and put on the microphone and listen yourself. There's so many things you can do, right? Right, Mist? I mean,
Yeah, just let them
it's
show
all in the
you, let them be excited with you. And just having that moment with them will head off so many problems, because then they'll want to run to you and be like, oh, I found this cool new sword, or, like, come look at this, look at this. And instead of you rolling your eyes, you just be like, cool. Like, yeah, I'm going to come and participate. And that's really what it is. It's just participation. Be there, because we're not always going to be perfect, but we can be there. And that's most of the battle.
totally. I agree. Well, Mist, I know we're gonna wrap this one pretty quickly. Sorry for those that may have expected a really long one, but with this heavy topic, we didn't know, like I personally didn't know how to approach it because it makes me uncomfortable too. So we wanted to give you all
Yeah.
a dedicated kind of bite of like just things to think about on the positive side. This is all most of this is in your control. As a parent, as an uncle, as an older brother that may have a much younger sibling, a lot of this is in your control, and you have the capability through love and you know kindness and the bond you may share with the youth in your family, you can totally have the ability to mitigate these problems because it's not like someone's walking into your house sitting next to, God forbid, but it's not like a physical being there, right? This is all digital online. And instead of taking it away entirely, which will probably promote the behavior more honestly. I mean, kids are rebellious. We're rebellious. I mean, even into our adulthood you embrace like Mist has said, and try to be there and show the interest so they know that what they're doing isn't entirely wrong, and then you can kind of coach from there. So, Mist, I appreciate this one, man. I'm looking forward to our next episode. It'll be our third collab, and then Mist and me will probably get back together here in a couple weeks. I have a couple more guests scheduled to come up. I think will be pretty interesting. But I'm most excited for this episode next week with Mist because we're just going open topic,
Me
bro.
too. Because then we can just have fun, and we
Yeah.
kind of got through it. And it's been a really rough week for me too. We had actually a lot of things happen in the anti-trafficking that
Oh,
just are really crazy. Hold on, just a sec. Let me fix
sure,
this.
sure, sure.
Um, but yeah, we had a lot of things happen in the anti-trafficking world that were just like, I can't believe that this is happening. Um, so it's been a really rough week, and that's kind of also why it's short. But I think that people learn best short too. But
Yeah.
anyway, next week is when we kind of get to kind of like let loose. We shed all this heaviness. We can talk, and we might even get more frustrated next week talking about topics. But it will be a release. We'll be
I
able
will
to
be
kind of
unleashed.
like,
We will be unleashed,
um,
and we're gonna go
yeah, we
all.
got. Go ahead.
No, I was just kidding. We're gonna have a good time. We're just gonna
Yeah,
talk
I'm
about
looking forward
whatever.
to it too. I want to bring
So
up some cool points about oil next week. That'll be really fun. So, but really good timing, Mike, and thank you for hosting this again. And sorry about the kind of like logistics issues today. Kind of a
no, man, this
crazy day,
happens.
but
No,
we
no
made it.
worries. We made it happen, man. We both were having some technical issues at first. Couldn't get you the link to like actually go through for you, which is
Yeah,
very
that was
weird.
weird.
It's like
It
they
was
didn't want
weird.
us to talk, but I guess it happened, and we got the. We're going to be able to get this out today. Again, is Friday, so I don't know if I'll be able to post tonight, today, but definitely by tomorrow morning. So if you're watching this, it'll be Saturday that you'll be watching, and we have recorded on Friday the 17th. But Miss, thanks, man. I hope you have a great evening,
You
and
too.
we'll link up here soon. And everyone that's watching, please go check out at Into the Mist 13 on X. Make sure to check out the channel here. Sub if you can, please. Like, comment. Would really appreciate that. Also, give me a follow on X as well at MNBFY Pod on X. And yeah, hope everyone has a great day and great weekend. And Misty, catch you later, bud.
Yeah, you too. Thanks a lot.
All right, take care. All right, y'all. Thank you. Have a good one.